Doug here. So I made progress on the welding program. Believe it or not, after doing all this hassle on the computer, I learned a lot, and I think I could pull it off inside the robot itself, and I'll explain how that works. But first, let me show you how cool it is. So let's pretend the tip of this end effector here is my welding torch, and this random obscure angled part, that's my weld I want to do. So first thing I'm going to do is I taught it this point. So let's move to that point. That's the start of the weld. So let's say I want to start welding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my weld program that I created, and I'm going to go all the way to the top. Here's all my parameters: weld width, weld weight, height, speed, acceleration, and centering. So at this point, I'm just going to hit forward. It's going to say, do you want to start from this position? Yes. And if you watch, it's doing a weave pattern across that weld. And when it gets to this spot here, I can stop it. So I've now welded that part. Well, all right, so I could have just programmed that. What makes this special? How do I adapt it to different weld positions? This is where it gets interesting. So let me walk you through that if you have the time. So let's say this weld changes. Let's say for some reason this weld is now, I'll still make it within the reach of the robot, on this angle here. Totally different angle. So what we do is we go into the Teach Pendant here. Hopefully I can get this on an angle that you can see what I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the menu, and I'm going to go to Setup, and I'm currently within the user frame. So let me go back. And you have different user frames, and what this does, this sets up a frame for the robot on where it is in space. That way you can program your X and Y on very strict Cartesian coordinates, but if you end up on a weird three-dimensional angle, it will transition your points to that user plane. Really powerful stuff, and this is what allowed me to do it within the robot and not have to use a computer, which is really awesome. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit clear, yes. So it now thinks 0, 0 is 0, 0. And we'll go into the detail of that, and we're going to teach it 3 points. And this is where the robot's really powerful. So first thing we're going to do is we need to teach it the origin point. Where do I want to start welding? So what I have to do is I have to just manually move this robot by hand. And we're going to go to world mode. And we'll enable the motors. And we're going to move to that position. So I'm bringing the robot back. We're going to take it down. It's a little bit of a slow process. I appreciate you sticking with me on this, but it is really cool to see. So we're going to get to the point I want to weld, like so. So that is now centered over that dot. And I'm now going to hit record. So you'll see here it says recorded. So it now knows what start point is. Well, now it needs to know the X and the Y of that weld. So I'm going to move it in the X axis along that position. And since it's a weird angle, I have to do this as 2 jog moves here. I'm using the X and Y control on the Teach Pendant to get it to exactly above that finish point. So once it's exactly above that finish point, I'm going to record that as the direction I moved in the X axis. So I'm going to hit record there. Now it needs to know the Y axis, which would be perpendicular, which I drew this little black line here so I know what that is. So what I want to do is I want to move the robot in that direction exactly 90 degrees from where I started. And once I do that, I'm going to hit record, and you see these will all say used. So it now knows this position. To prove it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the origin, and I'm going to say move to. We'll speed this up a little bit. So it now moved back to that origin position. So let's see if we can do this weld. So we're going to go back to my program, and we're going to go all the way to the top, and then we're going to hit start, and it'll say yes, I want to start from this position, and we're going to hit go. And look at that. It's now welding that new line. And when it gets to the end there, it stops. What's also really cool is I'm now in this user mode. So if I go to my coordinate system and I select user, and I speed this up here, I can move in that axis of operation in relation to that weld. So it allows me to continue on, move to a new spot much faster, and do that. So this will work in the Z-axis as well, or on a weird angle. I can set that all up, and I can weld at any angle in a straight line. So let me show you how this program works. So this will be more for the techie nerds here, if the rest of this wasn't already. So you saw the stuff. These are the parameters I'm writing to the registry at the beginning here. These are the things that I want to save for controlling the program. So what it does is it goes down here, and it sets the current position of where it is as position register 10, which is my weld start, or the linear position. So it takes currently where it is in space and stores that as position register, saying that's where I want to start the weld. Then there's the beginning of my loop, label 1. And the first thing I tell it to do is I want to do a linear motion to that weld start position. That just makes sure that where I recorded is where I want to go. And then I'm moving at weld speed, which is inches per minute, is a variable we set above. And then I have center, which is basically how much it cheats going to that edge, so it can actually round off the edge. That's my way of making a triangle wave into a sine wave, because it rounds off those hard edges. So that was a good way of cheating. And then I have acceleration set to 60, which is how fast it ramps up and down to get to that point. I need to play around with those values to figure out what will work well. Once I do that, I then need to modify its current position. So I'm taking a position register 10, 1, which we learned from my other video. That's the X position. I'm taking the X position itself, and then I'm adding the weight, the height of the weld to it. So basically, I'm just saying if you're at X1, add 10. You're now at X10. So that basically moves the gripper forward 10 millimeters. And then if we go down another line, you'll see I'm using comma 2, which is the Y, and I want to add the width to it. So I want to go forward, whatever, say 10 millimeters, and then go right 10 millimeters, depending what my width is. So I've now done the first diagonal move. So it won't move until I tell it to. So at this point, I give it a quick wait, and I tell it to do a linear move to that position. So it will, in the registry, move the point over and over, and then the robot will go to that diagonal point. And then further down, I do the same thing again. I move 5 forward, and then 5 to the left. But the problem is I'm already 5 over, so I have to go double points over. I then move the robot to that position. And then I go back, and then down, and then move to that position. Once I've done that, I've completed a full loop. I go all the way to the bottom down here, and you'll see the label goes back to the top. It just repeats that. It's an infinite cycle of doing that same sequence over and over again by incrementing the variables over and over. When it gets to the point I'm done, I literally just let go of the shift key, and it stops moving. It's that simple. I was doing all this complex code on the computer where the robot can handle the complex interpolation of user frames in reference to the real world. So I can do all my programming in a standard Cartesian plane with simple variable manipulation without having to deal with the tan, tangent, cosine of dealing with angles and finding a linear point between two 3D points. I forget that this robot is built to do those kinds of things, but I don't have the Weld feature pack. So I totally just wrote my own algorithm that does the welding for me. And it's actually a little bit more dynamic because I can actually set these points in the field while working on joints, because I'm not doing the same weld over and over again. How do I start the welder, you ask? Well, that's pretty easy. I hit shift, I hit start, and when I hit enter, I can have a digital output, turn the welder on, or honestly, I'm just going to cheat. I can literally just click the welder on, and when I'm done welding, I just turn it off. It's going to be that simple. I have a hand because the robot's doing the welding for me. But it's really cool. So if you guys have any questions on how this all works or want to see more, please let me know. Next step is going to be seeing if I can actually weld with this, which is going to be really exciting. But thanks for hanging out through this.